Getting a full count in the 2020 census has become more difficult with normal outreach hampered by the pandemic. The count matters for many reasons, especially for assessing needs. To tell us about efforts focused on students with learning and developmental disabilities is the executive director of the Federation for Students with Special Needs, Pam Nurse. Thank you very much for being with us, Pam.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Pam, I know before we get into what's going on now with these students, I think it's been quite a while you've been thinking about why the census is so important for these students. So why is that?
Oh, it's very, very important that children with special needs are counted in the census. The census, you know, is part of how we decide our representation in Congress. It's through the census and knowing what the needs are in different communities that we'll know what the needs are for very important things that impact children with disabilities, such as transportation, housing, and education. And that's why we've decided that we really want to be out there with a message that everyone counts, and to make sure that the people that we work with children with special needs are ensuring that they participate in the census.
By the way, is this about reflecting in the census information itself that we have a certain number of students with these needs, or is this just basically about getting all the families counted?
It's both. We want to make sure that all families are counted, but communities need to know what the needs are of the people that live in those communities. And that's why it's so important that children with disabilities are counted so that communities know what the needs are for their community, what the needs are for health care, for transportation, for education.
By the way, what about getting a clear definition of what a disability is? It could mean a lot of different things. Some people might not even want to think of themselves as having a disability. So how do you get clarity on that?
Well, I think that people need to just, really be honest and know that when we're asking about, is there a disability, that that they know that that's information that's going to help them. That's not going to be coming back to harm them. So it's just being very clear about what the needs are.
Well, when you started this campaign, I think you also knew from past years, there are communities that are just harder to reach for the census. What about those?
Absolutely. And part of what the Federation has done is, throughout all its work, is to be reaching out to underserved communities, which can include low-income communities. It can include communities whose families don't speak English. It could include recent immigrants. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were doing as part of this campaign is ensuring that we were reaching people who speak different languages. So our messages that we have up are not just in English, but in other languages as well.
I think of Chinese, Spanish, Creole.
Yes, they are in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Haitian Creole.
Now, for people who are used to using computers all the time, filling out the census information is pretty easy. I actually did it myself in less than 2 minutes, but that's faint praise, But for people who are not familiar with computers or who have a lack of access, how difficult can this get?
Well, the census is trying to make sure that it's making it as easy as possible for people to fill out the form. People who don't have access to a computer can be doing it, for example, by phone. And so that there's lots of different avenues for people to use.
By the way, what has it been like for the children with special needs, especially the ones who have to adjust to schools being closed?
Yeah, well, school closure has had a major, major impact on all children, but particularly children with special needs. A lot of them are children who are used to having one-on-one aides in school, who are used to getting a variety of supports. And oftentimes those supports, may not be available. So I think schools are doing the best that they can to reach out to families and to continue what services can be continued remotely. But for a lot of these children, their routines have been disrupted. The resources and support that they count on are no longer available. And that's difficult for the children, and it puts a lot of pressure on families as well.
Well, one thing I think these students must miss when they're at home with just a computer is that you don't have the inclusive learning experience. Explain the difference.
That's right. So many children are, receive their education in a lot of different ways. They may be in a classroom with lots of other children, and maybe they have an aide with them, and maybe they have someone who, or maybe they go out of the classroom to for part of the day, but for the majority of the day, they would have been in a classroom, with children with other special needs and children without disabilities. And there's a lot of learning that happens that way. That type of collaboration and working together is not obviously, these days as available to children.
One thing that occurs to me as things move toward reopening, there will be some students, many students, who can walk to school on their own because the school isn't very far away. I think the special needs students, more likely their parents are choosing another school outside the neighborhood. They really depend on getting there in a bus or a van. Doesn't that maybe make reopening more of a challenge for them?
It does. Transportation is a critical issue for children with disabilities. And, certainly I think that that's something that, our education officials are taking into account as they try and think about how it could reopen. But without transportation, children with disabilities may not have the same opportunities as other children have.
Pam, finally, we should mention that if any parent wants to catch up on the census and get a little help with that, is there some way they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. The easiest way is to go onto our website, fcsn.org, and we have people who are available and ready to help anyone who has any questions.